Hey everybody, welcome to Moment of Clarity. So I watched the DNC, most of the DNC speeches last week. I watched a couple of the speeches from the RNC so far. And look, I've been a longtime advocate of a sociopathy test for politicians to see if they are sociopaths and then they wouldn't be allowed to run as politicians. I've advocated that for a long time now. And I have to admit that there's maybe one moment where I'm not supporting that stance, because right now we would be watching an empty stage for like 4 straight nights plus last week. And I just don't think that would make for good TV. I just don't think it would if just an empty stage for hours on end. So we'd have to take a breather from the sociopathy test during these conventions, and then we could reinstate it right afterwards. But the other thing I've noticed about these speeches, about these so-called conventions, DNC, RNC, is that, a lot of people are talking negatively as if these are dire times and these two parties are at each other's throats and can't agree on anything. I don't see that at all. This is actually quite thrilling to see how much the two parties agree on. It makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside. I mean, if you go off the things, if you look at the things they're not discussing, the things they're not talking about, because it doesn't differentiate them from the other party, they feel no need to mention it because these things just don't, they're not different enough. So there's no need to discuss it at the RNC or DNC. If you look at that list of things, it's massive. It's massive how much these two parties agree on. For example, that we're the largest surveillance state in the world, or close, one of the largest. That's not even mentioned, right? Because they agree on it. It's really nice to see how much agreement there is that we should just be one of the most surveilled countries ever, that they should collect all of our data, that they should know all of our emails, all of our phone calls if they want to, that there's basically no regulation on that front. Two parties agree. Very exciting. Net neutrality, a thing of the past. I haven't heard any of them bring that up or have any qualms with that. So clearly they agree on that. Corporations buying elections, and the richest Americans buying elections. Been very little talk about that in the past year or so. So, the two parties clearly agree that since Citizens United, nothing has gone wrong, and corporations and the richest Americans should be able to buy our elections. So exciting to see the two parties come together on that, the two corporate parties. Our endless wars overseas, endless wars around the world, Afghanistan going on for damn near 20 years, and we now know from the Afghanistan papers that most of it has been a lie, that there is no end game, there is no goals per se. It's just to keep wreaking havoc and always be there, and neither side seems to of this dual-winged beast. Neither side seems to have any problem with that, because they never really mention it. So again, agreement. Very exciting to see so much agreement, so much hand-holding on these issues. Our military bases around the world, 900 to 1,000, somewhere around there. They all seem fine with that. Pentagon failed their only audit. Just last year, end of 2018, they failed their only audit. The auditors came forward, 1,000 auditors came forward and said, we have no fucking clue. We don't know what's going on. We don't know where the money goes. We couldn't get to the bottom of any of it. Have fun with that. And the Pentagon said, yeah, we failed our audit. There it is. And that was the end of the discussion. And neither party has mentioned that. Neither party discusses it because they're fine with it. And again, it's good to see them agree on that. $21 trillion of unaccounted for adjustments on the Pentagon's own books, that their own books. You can go and look at them. Now, 21 trillion, in all honesty, people have gotten on me about that. Lee, that's not true. And I have to admit, you're right. It's not true. It's way over 21 trillion. Way over. 21 trillion was an old number from, a couple years ago, and it's much higher than that. It's, 30, 40 trillion of unaccounted for adjustments. And neither corporate party has any qualms with that, at least not mentioning it in their convention, so I assume they're cool with it. Largest prison state in the world, that's hardly mentioned. Both sides seems okay with that. The slight mention was at the RNC where they got on Joe Biden for helping to imprison so many people. But we know that Trump has no problem locking up black and brown people, so I can't imagine that's a real problem at the RNC. Wall Street, going basically completely unregulated, deregulated, just extracting all of the wealth and resources to a tiny number of individuals. Both sides seem cool with that. Not a lot of talk about that. The Gini coefficient, the level of inequality in this country, that's what the Gini coefficient is. It tells you how much inequality there is in a society or in a culture, and ours is now well past the Gini coefficient of ancient Rome just before its collapse, and neither corporate party has any problem with that. RNC, DNC, totes cool with it. They're high-fiving on that. Good to see agreement, like I've been saying. Good to see agreement on all these things. Trillions of dollars of cash hidden in offshore tax havens, not paying taxes on it. It was 11 trillion, but again, that's an old number. That's from like around the Occupy time, so it's probably double that by now. Neither party has a problem with it. America's infrastructure doesn't need fixing, apparently, because that doesn't really get talked about. We're just watching it collapse, and we're all drinking lead out of the tap water, so that's kind of good for you, right? Get kind of a bulletproof vest on the inside of the body, and all our bridges are collapsing, roads are falling apart, and doesn't seem either party has a problem with that, judging by their conventions. Unions, weaker than they've ever been. 7% or something of the workforce is unionized. And of course, unions, whether there's a problem here or a problem there, in general, unions are how workers have power and how they get a lot of things like a weekend or like time off or like paid time off or like sick leave or those kind of things. Unions have been gutted, and neither corporate party seems to have an issue with that. So good to see them agree on that one as well. Capitalism apparently doesn't have any flaws that need discussing. If you look at either corporate party, at least not that I've heard mentioned in either convention, and I don't think it'll be mentioned in the rest of the RNC. So even if you are a full-on capitalist, you got a big phone number one hand that says capitalism, still, that doesn't mean that it should be off limits to discuss flaws or discuss ways to make things better. But nope, no discussion, no mention, can't be talked about. These guys are just totally cool with it. Environmental destruction apparently should basically continue at this pace. We have no problem with the fact that our biodiversity has crashed. The number of insects is seeing like basically a genocide. I don't know if that's the term for insects, but insect holocaust. The number of apparently the only remaining wild animal is one raccoon in upstate New York. So they did find that guy. He's still out there, so that's good to see. But yeah, environmental collapse, even outside of just climate change. Yes, the Democrats will mention climate change a lot because they think that looks good, but they're not actually doing anything about it. But even outside of just climate change, environmental destruction continues even without climate change. We're breathing in plastics in the air. Our water is dirty. There's just so much about our world environmentally that is collapsing, that is having trouble, and it's never really talked about, never discussed. Both parties seem to agree. Totally cool. Totally fine with it. Hundreds of millions apparently should be dying from dirty water around the world. That isn't mentioned, even though we could totally stop that. Like we, meaning America, could fund clean water worldwide easily. Jeff Bezos himself could fund clean water worldwide easily, saving hundreds of millions of lives. It's like one of the number one killers of humans in poor countries. And we both parties, not an issue, so I assume they agree that should continue, that it's nice to see hundreds of million people, mainly children and elderly and those who are sick. Those are the ones who tend to die from those type of things. And apparently both parties, they're a fan. Just say they're a fan of all that death and destruction. I don't know if they have some sort of video feed they get to watch and go, cool, look at all those kids dying. Who knows? But yeah, they're a fan. Nuclear doomsday clock is now at what, 30 seconds to midnight. Scientists believe that we're basically on the cusp of nuclear Armageddon, judging by the way things are headed, where things are headed, and both parties totally fine with it. Not an issue. Not an issue. So, that's some of them. Feel free to add in your own list of things that both these parties have come together on. And like I said, this is just beautiful to see. It's because we thought going into this election that there was going to be a lot of strife, a lot of disagreement on things. But if you look at these, and you could call them some of the core issues of our time, to see so much agreement between the two corporate parties is beautiful. It's just beautiful. It feels like it gives me a warm, fuzzy feeling right in the bottom of my balls. And it feels like the nation is just in a big hug over all of these issues that we agree on. And I just like to see it. I love to see it. I love to see cooperation and agreement. And there's clearly nothing to fix here. There's nothing to stand up against, nothing to fight against, because there's just so much agreement and love on these major issues. I don't know where you guys stand. But yeah, and this is how you end up in this type of situation, is when you give people a faux choice. You say, hey, it's A or B. And it turns out A or B both connect on 90% of the structural issues of our time. Then they go, oh, okay, I don't know, A, how about B? And luckily, you get to keep them voting for those 90%. They're going to keep all of those things ongoing because you gave them a false choice. And it's a brilliant form of manipulation. And I wish we had more people talking about it. I wish even in I know many of you, if you're watching this, you probably get a lot of your news from alternative sources and outside of the mainstream. And I wish we even had this talked about more in those alternative sources. Many of them, not all of them by any means, but many of them will talk about a lot of these issues, but still at the end of the day be like, yeah, but it's all about fuck the Republicans, or it's all about fuck the Democrats. So even in the alternative outlets, you'll often see them still come down to the red-blue paradigm. And, it's just so fucked that our brains have all been captured into this tiny cage of allowable thought. It's maddening. And Ahmad wants to know what's going to happen next in the Middle East. Yeah, there's another one that they seem to agree on. Not a lot of criticism between the RNC and the DNC about what's going on in the Middle East, right? Even though Trump assassinated General Soleimani on Iraqi soil, one of the most, largest war criminal acts that we've seen in a while, and putting us on the cusp of a major all-out war with a major global power, and you don't even really see that hardly mentioned by the DNC. I mean, it's fucking incredible. And people fall for this. They fall for the distraction. They fall for the shiny thing, for the jingling noise in front of them, and they don't ask the larger questions. They can't see past it, and it's fucking pathetic. But yeah, so something to think about. Hope you guys are enjoying the RNC. It is a blast to see all those kind of quasi-feral animals allowed up on a stage with a microphone and all. It's kind of neat. That's your moment of clarity. I've been doing these almost every day, so please check them out almost every day. And if you miss one, just go to leecamp.com. I'll be putting them up there every single day, except sometimes. That's my new policy. Every single fucking day, except sometimes. Boom. So go to leecamp.com, sign up for the email list. That's slightly less suppressed than everything else. And keep fighting.